You want to come in the frame a little bit more? I know you have to like keep a holy distance, but I need you more in the frame. All right. Okay. Hi, I'm Regina Lux, and this is Veritas on the Rocks. And today I am here with
Father Jacob Boddicker of the Society of Jesus, friend and guest of said Regina Lux.
And he is joining me on the set today and honoring all of us by telling us his vocation story. So I'm very excited to be able to create this video, and let's do it.
Okay. And I was just thinking too, it's kind of fitting and appropriate, as St. Thomas Aquinas might say, that, we're recording this on the vigil of the feast of St. Ignatius of Loyola. I guess my patron saint is a Jesuit, but the founder of our order, and also just a really awesome saint.
Yeah.
So, it just kind of struck me as like, it's kind of appropriate, and I'm very happy to be here. And it's kind of surreal, I have to admit. Like, I'm used to being on the other side, watching it on YouTube on my laptop.
Yeah.
But now I'm on it. I'm in the Matrix now.
In the Matrix. The first time I ever FaceTimed with you, it was really cute because you were just like, oh, I'm there. like I'm a somebody.
Yeah. Well, when you see somebody on YouTube and then you like meet them, it's kind of...
Yeah.
It's different.
I'm really happy I can give you that kind of experience.
So I started in eastern Iowa, and I was born in Cedar Rapids, which is kind of right around the area of Iowa City, eastern part of the state. Not a huge city, at least for me growing up. It was the big city. And I was the first of my parents' kids. My mom had a child from a previous marriage, so I grew up with an older half-brother. Mm-hmm. I was the first of my parents' kids. I had a younger sister and two younger brothers. And spent most of my life growing up outside a small town called Tipton, out in the country on a dead-end road, surrounded by corn and bean fields. We had a creek to play in, a timber to explore, a big barn to play in. So, and no internet, no video games. So grew up with a very active imagination, and there were any dark corner of the barn, there was some creature that lived there. Played a lot of army with my brother. And we were always, using our imaginations and telling stories. And grew up Catholic. I don't remember really learning anything about my faith, though. And I think it was common to a lot of Catholic families where the parents kept their promise that they made at their child's baptism to raise their children to know and love God and the faith by taking them to Sunday school. And you drop them off. You trust that they're going to learn something there.
Yeah.
And my Sunday school teachers were nice people, but I don't think they even really knew their faith that well, and they didn't know how to teach it. So I remember a lot of things I did in Sunday school, arts and crafts and things like that, but I don't remember learning anything. I remember one teacher who was very keen on making sure we learned about each of the 7 sacraments. And so I remember him, and I still keep in touch with him. He writes me letters sometimes.
Aww.
But outside of him, I don't remember really learning anything. And so I went through my young Catholic life, got my sacraments, but really didn't know Jesus, didn't really know my faith, didn't know how special being Catholic was compared to any other denomination. I thought it was kind of like, you go to Baskin Robbins and they've got all these different flavors of ice cream. It's all ice cream. It's all equally good. It's just what flavor do you prefer?
So if Catholicism was a flavor of ice cream, what would it be?
Well, back then, I would have said it would be something like Moose Tracks or something, where it's got tons of different stuff in it. But nowadays, I would say it's not ice cream. It's either gelato or frozen custard. And everybody else is, ice cream of different kinds. But yeah, back then it was just one church among many. One thing I will say is my dad was very, very keen on making sure we went to Mass every Sunday.
Yeah.
That was a non-negotiable. So even if we went to spend the weekend at a friend's house, he would talk to the parents to make sure that they dropped us off at Mass or he could come and get us.
Good.
Which I found incredibly annoying because I didn't like going to Mass. I thought it was really boring.
Yeah.
That boredom was alleviated a little bit in third grade when I was allowed to start serving.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the server who wanted to do everything.
Oh, yeah.
And so I knew exactly where to stand in line, where to stand next to the altar, so that I would end up getting to do all the things because Mass was boring.
You just loved serving that much.
I loved not being bored. So, fast forward, get to high school, and still, Sunday Mass. It was Thursday night catechism class. I don't remember learning really anything. I didn't know the catechism was a book until as a novice. That was kind of a mind-blowing revelation.
Wow.
It's a book. I can read it and learn things. But in high school, my desire when I thought about the future was I wanted to be a father and a husband.
Yeah.
That was my main thing ever since 6th grade. For 4th grade, I wanted to be a paleontologist. I love dinosaurs. In fact, my first girlfriend broke up with me in 5th grade because she felt I loved dinosaurs more than her, which is probably accurate.
You don't love me like you love dinosaurs.
Exactly. And then in 6th grade, I wanted to be an astronaut, and I let go of that. And I don't know how it happened, but that same year, I really fell in love with music, classical music specifically. And through that, especially through like Beethoven, I think it was, I really had a very profound encounter with beauty that really ended up, I think, kind of steering me eventually toward this vocation and deepening my relationship with God. Because there were certain kinds of music and certain pieces of music that I could listen to, and I felt like I was experiencing something beyond kind of the ordinary, and I was connecting with something deeper than I could experience anything else. And so it was this deep desire to pursue beauty, encounter beauty. I also, around that same time, had a deep desire to give myself in love and to be loved. And I wanted so much to be a father and a husband, which made being a 6th grader really difficult because I was, years ahead of everybody else in my grade. Yeah. So there was this kind of peculiar loneliness that kind of settled around me too. Mm. So I was like a journaler and kind of a tortured artist, and spent a lot of time alone thinking and writing and noticing the world around me and noticing what made people happy and what didn't. And that slowly led me to trying to find a way of living my life that would be like, I guess, equip me to be my best self and to pursue what was true and right. Mm-hmm. And if I knew my faith better, I would have started reading the Bible and studying the Gospels especially, and trying to see like, okay, what does God say is the best way to live? But I didn't have that kind of faith. And so I think it was right around 8th grade or so, I picked up a new best friend. He just moved in town. We were into the same things, Star Wars, sci-fi, King Arthur and all that. And I watched this movie, Dragonheart, with Dennis Quaid, and Sean Connery was the voice of the dragon.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a corny movie. It's fun. But there's this character played by Dennis Quaid named Bowen, and he's a knight of the old school. The kind of knight that makes vows and keeps them. His word is his bond. And the world around him gets increasingly evil, increasingly distant away from those traditional values. And he finds himself very alone and kind of left behind. And he despairs a bit, and he becomes kind of this rogue dragon hunter mercenary type who's fine, bilking villagers out of their money to convince them that he killed a dragon and all that. And there's a moment in the movie later where he realizes that he's kind of strayed from his core values. And he's on Avalon in front of this kind of effigy of Arthur. And this voice kind of charges him to renew his oaths as a knight. Mm-hmm. And for me, as an 8th grader, kind of sympathizing with this guy, like feeling very out of place, left behind by the world, having mm-hmm. these kind of more traditional values, that really resonated with me. And so in 9th grade, I kind of fell in love for the first time, and it ended up being the girl that my best friend was dating. And I didn't fall in love with her at that time. Eventually did. But there was a moment when she invited me to come watch a movie at her house. And this was, she was dating my best friend. I had no romantic interest in her at that time. That came later. But I did like her as a friend. She was geeky and smart and stuff. So I asked my dad if I could go over and hang out and watch a movie. And he asked if her parents were going to be there. And I asked her, and she said they were out bowling and they'd be back in like an hour. And so I told him that. He said, "You can't go." And I was really shocked because I was the good kid. I was responsible, mm-hmm. reliable. My parents let me do just about anything. Not because they spoiled me, but because they trusted me.
Yeah, you were trustworthy.
And so I told her I couldn't go, hung up, and I asked my dad, why couldn't I go? Because I couldn't think of any reason for him to say no. And he said, well, I was a young man once, and you just don't need to be put in that kind of situation. Mm-hmm. And in hindsight, I realized he's just being a good dad.
Yeah.
But at the time, I felt very hurt.
Yeah.
And I felt very misjudged and mischaracterized because I only had a couple of guy friends at school. All the other guys thought I was weird. There was something wrong with me.
Because you were a romantic?
Because I was romantic. I was respectful to teachers and to all the women in the school. So much so that, like, in band, there was a few upperclassmen who would pick on me. And the senior girls would come to my defense. Say, you leave him alone. He is the sweetest, young man, like... And if you keep bugging him, we're not going to prom with you. Stuff like that. And so they backed off. But I realized, as I kind of explored, like, why does this hurt so much that I couldn't go watch this movie with my friend who later I would fall in love with. And I realized my dad only knows me in the context of my home. Mm-hmm. He's not at school when I'm being challenged and I have to make choices based on my values and my character's being tested.
Yeah.
'Cause at home, I'm the obedient kid who watches my younger siblings mm-hmm. and, behaves well and gets good grades. And so that's when I realized, I need to find a way to live my life so that people know who I am by how I live. Mm-hmm. And again, if I had a better grasp of my faith, I would have turned to the Gospels, to examples of the saints.
Yeah.
But I didn't have that. What did I have? I had King Arthur. I had Bowen from Dragonheart. I had Lancelot from the really, really corny movie First Night with Sean Connery and who is that actor? Richard Gere was Lancelot. And the reason I admired him is Lancelot in this version of the Arthurian legend was this rogue guy, went around sword fighting people out of their money. And his family had been killed in a raid when he was young. And so he lived his life fearless because he felt like he had nothing to lose. Mm. And so, if something bad happened and he died, he didn't care. But there's a line in the movie where he ends up doing this really cool performance through this obstacle course, and Arthur is like, hey, you want to join my knights? You have great skill. And Lancelot's like, nah. And Arthur asks him, like, how are you so fearless? He says, I don't have anything to lose. And then Arthur says, a man who doesn't think he has anything to lose doesn't love anything. And it really hits Lancelot, who is also starting to crush on Guinevere, and we all know where that goes. But that whole thing of like being fearless because you feel like you have nothing to lose really struck me, and I was very nervous and shy. And so I was like, why am I afraid? What am I afraid of? So I stopped being afraid in a lot of ways. Initially because I felt like I had nothing to lose. Mm-hmm. But Arthur's question challenged me. It's like, well, maybe I'm not aware of what I actually have. And so the example of Bowen the Knight with like holding on to this code, my dad totally misjudging and mischaracterizing me, and me feeling like maybe I need to live a life of deeper integrity. Like the person I am at home is the person I am at school. Mm-hmm. Led me to take my own oaths of chivalry with like God as my witness. And I took the same oaths that Bowen made in the Dragonheart movie. And so every morning and when I woke up and every night when I went to bed, I would renew those vows and try to live them at home and at school as best I could. Like one of the oaths is his wrath undoes the wicked. And I was like, well, clearly I'm not going to go to school, like start a bunch of fights. Or like his might defends the helpless. Mm-hmm. And so I always tried to look out for people who were being picked on, who needed help. Yeah. Tried to respect people. And I found, as Aristotle would write about, gosh, the more you do it, the easier it gets. Mm-hmm. And then it eventually becomes a habit. Yeah. And so whether it was everything from, a knight always speaks the truth. And that's when I started realizing like how many little white lies I would often tell. Yeah. And so pushing myself to like, no, just come out with the truth right away, always. Mm-hmm. To be helpful, to be respectful. And at first, nobody really noticed. But I remember my senior year, I got to go on a trip to Scotland for 2 weeks with my mom. And I got emails from people that I didn't know personally, mm-hmm. who would say things like, hey, Jake, I hear you're on some trip. I was worried about you because I'm used to seeing you sitting by your locker and saying good morning to me every day. Aww. And when you weren't there for a few days, I thought maybe you were really sick or something. Aww. So I just wanted to say, like, I miss that. And people saying, I miss going to lunch and seeing you holding the door open for everybody. And I realized, like, it was making a difference.
Yeah, people did notice, even though they weren't directly telling you.
Right. And they noticed the absence of those mm-hmm. little acts of kindness and respect. And so it was working. However, I also, going back to the, first falling in love thing, eventually that friend who I wasn't able to go watch a movie with, and my best friend broke up. And eventually I worked up the guts to tell her how I felt and was brutally shot down. Mm-hmm. I told her, like, I'd do anything you asked. And she was like, I want you to not love me. Like, okay.
Oh, wow.
And so it was very heartbreaking, mm-hmm. and it made me afraid to really, like, put my heart out there toward anyone anymore. Yeah. As far as, romantic. Because, again, like, I wanted to be a father and a husband, so I wasn't just looking for a girlfriend. I was looking for a future spouse, Like,
we're 14 now. Gotta start looking.
I wasn't in that big a hurry. But I wasn't interested in just dating around because my heart was ready to give itself to somebody. Yeah. And I think that's why girls were kind of intimidated by that, and mm-hmm. that they just weren't at that point. But what that experience taught me was the importance of being willing to love the other for their sake. And it wasn't about what I wanted. And so even if somebody asked me something really difficult like that. I had to be able to love them enough to let them go if that's what they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And so it started teaching me about real love. Love is, willing the good for the sake of the other.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's all about, and being able to put yourself aside. And, and I'd fall in love a couple other times and be pretty brutally shot down. And then on the other side too, because of how I was living my life and treating people with respect and kindness, a lot of girls in my school would come to me asking if they could talk to me about something going on in their life.
So you became a spiritual director before
in a sense, or just a listening ear or a shoulder to cry on. And, unbeknownst to me, like God was letting me practice a little sort of priesthood already and teaching me, chastity and caring for souls already, even though I wasn't seeing it going in that direction. And so those experiences of falling in love, being heartbroken, trying to live a life of integrity, being committed to some sort of vow or promise, were all very foundational in what would later become my vocation, even though at the time I didn't know that. I didn't see that. But God was already at work. The only inkling I had of a vocation to the priesthood was, I think in 7th or 8th grade, a cousin of mine was visiting our home, and he saw me folding laundry on the dinner table, and he just watched me for a while, and then he said, Jake, you've got the right attitude to be a priest. And I was like, whatever. And I just continued folding.
It's like your little altar that you're practicing at.
I guess. But, I think he saw, like, that virtue of obedience and a willingness to do humble tasks without grumbling.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe he saw some other things too, but I remembered it later on, as I'll relate, when I first felt like God was calling me to think about priesthood. It's like, well, that makes no sense. And then I had this memory of my cousin telling me, like, oh my gosh, he saw it then. Mm-hmm. And now I'm seeing it.
Well, I mean, all of this, kind of to jump in, it really speaks to the importance of exposing children to beauty, at least in a parish. Mm-hmm. Like, that's why it's so important that parishes be beautiful to the eye.
Yeah.
And the music be beautiful, because you're leaving the world and stepping someplace that's going to be the closest to heaven that you can get on earth. And that's going to really affect children,
Yeah.
And then you let that fuel your desire for more beauty. Like you experience Beethoven, and that pushed you towards exploring more beauty. So it's so important for children to be surrounded by that kind of otherworldly beauty, because that encourages vocations.
Right. Because, we all desire, beauty is one of those just fundamental things that every human being is drawn to and desires. And, we have so many young people, for example, their first encounter with beauty per se ends up being pornography.
Yeah.
And so they think that is beauty, and they pursue that and hunger for that, and it just leads to self-destruction.
Yeah.
I was fortunate to grow up in a house that didn't have internet until I was in high school. We didn't have cable or satellite TV, depending on the weather. That determined how many channels we got. And so I was really sheltered from a lot of that. And so my, first encounters with beauty were music. My dad was really into music. He was always playing the piano. And my mom was always playing music on the stereo, different kinds of music. We also lived out in the country. And so we were exposed to the beauty of nature all the time. And I loved going outside and going down to the creek and going through the timber and things like that. My mom loved taking us to art museums and things like that. So that beauty, it awakened a desire, I think, ultimately for God. Even though I couldn't articulate it that way then.
Because objective beauty communicates the goodness of truth to you. So you see something beautiful, you're drawn towards the truth and raw goodness of it.
And I think too, like when I think about the times in high school that I was falling in love, the people that my heart was drawn to were people who were objectively, at least in my understanding at the time, beautiful. They weren't the kind of people that guys in my grade were running after. Because these are people that I'd gotten to know.
So you mean like beautiful in virtue?
Yeah. Yeah, especially the second one I fell in love with. And like I remember, for example, not only was she modest and had a lovely singing voice and was, outwardly attractive, but the time where I really realized, like, this is the kind of woman I want to be with was when I was sitting next to her on the floor in the cafeteria, just chit-chatting. And there was a young man with Down syndrome who was walking by. He tripped and fell. And everybody started laughing.
Oh.
And he started crying. And he immediately crawled over to her and buried his head in her lap.
Because he knew that she was a safe place. Because she had demonstrated beforehand.
Yeah. And that's when I was like, she's the one. Because I saw, like, there was a tremendous beauty within her that just captured my heart. And again, it didn't end up going anywhere, being brutally shot down. And that's a story for another day. But again, it was, God was teaching my heart something really important, and trying to teach me about, like, real beauty and about himself. So that I'd be drawn to him eventually.
Yeah.
So eventually graduated high school, and went off to college, and I didn't have any plans for a future. None.
Like, here I am. I'm just going to pay an exorbitant amount of money until I figure it out.
Exactly. Because when my guidance counselor, asked, like, okay, where do you want to go to school? What do you want to study? What do you want to pursue? I was like, I just want to be a dad. I don't really care what I do. I'll work at the grocery store. I'll get this job or whatever. Like, I don't have any desires to go to school or to pursue a career. And he's like, well, that's just unacceptable. Like, if you don't go to college, you'll just not end up being anything. And I was like, well, you don't need a college degree to be a dad, right? So he was worried and my parents are worried. And so when I graduated, everybody's going down the line saying, oh, so-and-so was awarded this scholarship and that scholarship, and they got accepted into this school. They're going to study this. And it comes to me, and Jacob Boddicker, nothing. No scholarships.
You're going to be a dad.
I didn't apply for anything, and had no plans. And again, parents, teachers, everybody is kind of worried about me. But then that summer, I was visiting relatives in Laramie, Wyoming, and my aunt suggested I tour the University of Wyoming because it was a cool school. And so I did, and I learned they had an archaeology program, and I loved hunting Indian artifacts with my dad and stuff, and so I thought, well, I'll apply and see if I get in. And I got in, and they gave me a scholarship and stuff, and I was like, I don't see why everybody freaks out about this. It was so easy. I just met one time, and they're like, yeah, if you apply, we can give you this scholarship and that. I was like, great, awesome. And so I started as a student there. And I would say during my 2 years at Wyoming, the most significant thing vocation-wise was I went on my first retreat. I remember my friends at the Newman Center asking, hey, do you want to go on a retreat this weekend? And I said, from what?
From what?
And they're all like, what are you talking about? I said, well, when you retreat, you're running from something, right? They're like, no. This is different. And they explain, it's a
running
weekend.
From the world.
Well, I guess you could say that, but I didn't know what a retreat was. And they described it as, we're going to go away for the weekend and pray and, like, grow in our faith. And I was like, that sounds really boring. And then it's like, well, but so-and-so is going to be there, so I'm like, okay, I'll go. And not only was it surprisingly fun, but I remember we had this kind of penance service, and I remember there was a line of college students, men and women. There were even people who weren't Catholic who went on this thing. And the priest at the other end of the room, one person at a time is going to him for confession. And I look at this line, and they're all weeping and like deep, deep sorrow for their sins.
Wow.
And they go to the priest, and then they come away weeping for joy. And I watched over and over this transformation from sorrow to joy, looking weighed down and scared to looking free and happy.
Wow.
And I realized whatever's happening over there with that priest is real and powerful. And I knew it was confession, but I'd never had that experience of confession before. And I didn't realize the sacraments actually had any power.
Mm.
And so I witnessed for the first time, like, the sacraments have power. And I came away from that retreat grateful that I was Catholic and realizing, like, yeah, I don't want to be anything else. I'm Catholic. That's who I am. That's what I'm always going to be. And so I really firmed up my Catholic identity. That following summer, I started dating for the first time. Mm-hmm. One of my sister's friends fell in love with me. And so I thought, okay, this is safe.
Yeah.
I'm not the one putting my heart out there. She's putting her heart out there, and I can reciprocate. We were together 1.5 years, and it was not it was not a godly relationship. She ultimately broke up with me because I'd made a promise to God that I would wait for marriage. She didn't want to wait.
Wow.
But I was so desperate to love and to be loved that I found myself making all sorts of compromises just because I was afraid of losing her.
Yeah.
And so when God freed me from that relationship, when she lost her patience with me, he began to show me, like, all the compromises that I'd made and all the ways that this relationship was not good for my soul. Mm-hmm. And that was also around the time I had switched schools. I'd gone from the University of Wyoming to Northern Iowa, and he introduced me to a young woman named Laura. We were friends. She lived a couple floors below me in the dorm. She was an RA. And in the wake of that, my one and turns out only relationship ending, he started helping me to see the virtues of Laura, who was a very devout Christian. She was Methodist. And she spoke about Jesus like he was someone she knew personally. Mm-hmm. And I was floored by that. Because for me, Jesus was somebody I believe existed.
Yeah.
Back then, and did some important things for
did
me.
Some stuff that was cool.
Yeah, he was a religious belief.
Yeah.
But the idea that you could personally know him, that was new. And so I started becoming friends with her, A, because she was very kind, but B, because I wanted to learn, like, how to know Jesus. But in the wake of this breakup, God started to show me, like, if you want a future wife, this is what you've been looking for all along. And all those lessons he taught me in my youth about real beauty and what love really is about, and mm-hmm. virtue and things like that, and integrity, like, I saw it all in her. Oh. And so I was already good friends with her and wanted, very much to go further with that. And I was sharing how I felt and all my thoughts, but I could never get her to share how she felt about me. And so I was just patient. It's like, well, eventually she has to say something eventually. Well, right around that time, I was a double major in education and history. So I thought I could be a social studies teacher. Archaeology wasn't doing it for me. I realized that wasn't something I felt like I could give my life to. Mm-hmm. Well, I dropped the education major, realizing I did not have a vocation to be a teacher. Everybody in my class, oh yeah, my parents are teachers. I want to be a teacher since I was in kindergarten. And I was just like, some of my teachers said they thought I could be a good teacher, so I thought I'd try it out. So did not have vocation, dropped it, was just studying history. And then started thinking, like, what am I going to do with a history degree?
Teach.
Well, but without that education degree, can't be a teacher. So it just kind of hit me all at once. Like, my girlfriend broke up with me, changed majors yet again, was not happy. And I realized I'd fallen into this kind of assembly line way of living. Because in all throughout my schooling years, they said, do good in school so you can go to the college you want, study what you want, get the job you want, live the life you want, earn the money you want, and you'll be happy.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, I did well in school. I've gone to the schools I wanted, studied what I wanted. I'm not happy yet.
Yeah.
Like, do you have to complete all the steps to get happy? Like, I feel like if you're doing all the things they tell you will make you happy, you should start to be happy and feel fulfilled. But I had no sense of what to do with my life.
You mean the world telling you how to be happy?
Yeah, it didn't
make
work.
you happy?
Here to tell you, didn't work. I was just lost and confused, unfulfilled. And I realized no one in the world knew what I should do. Even my parents didn't know the answer.
Yeah.
They could give me suggestions. But it hit me, only God knows why I'm here and what I should do with my life. And that's when I realized I need to pray. I need to talk to God about this. And it hit me, not only do I not know how to pray, I don't know how to listen to God. So I could talk to him all I want, but if I don't know how to listen,
wow,
what's it going to do?
Yeah.
So in that moment of, I called it my midlife crisis, qualifying it with the hope that I don't die at 40, because I was only 20. But I just had no sense of direction. So I started to pray the rosary as best I knew how, because I joined the Knights of Columbus to be a knight.
Be a knight.
And when you join, you promise to carry the rosary with you and to pray it as often as possible. No one ever taught me how to pray the rosary.
What?
But I kept it always. I always had a rosary in my pocket, no matter where I went. But I didn't know how to pray it. So...
See, I cannot wrap my mind around that. Really?
Yeah, my parents never taught me. We would pray the rosary as a family sometimes, like on long car trips, but Dad always led it. And we would just, Hail Mary, full of grace. I knew that. I knew the Our Father. I knew which beads you prayed the Our Father on and the Hail Mary on. Didn't know the mysteries, the fat on prayer, none of that. So,
and now you're a priest.
And now I'm a priest. Aren't you happy?
It's a despite though. Don't not teach your kids the rosary because you want them to be a priest.
Yes, teach them the rosary.
Teach them the rosary. Wow. Oh my gosh.
So when I realized I had no idea how to pray, the thought came to me like, well, everybody says the rosary is a powerful prayer. I don't know how to pray the rosary, but I know which beads are Our Fathers, which are Hail Marys. So I thought, okay, God, I'm going to pray the rosary as best I know how. And just trust that you're going to do something with that.
Yeah.
And so I did. Every spare moment I had, if I was to class early, finish a test early, walking to class, getting ready for bed, whatever, I was praying those Our Fathers and Hail Marys with the rosary and asking God at every Our Father bead, give me comfort and guidance. I need that. I'm scared and I'm lost. And about a month after starting that, this would have been maybe mid-November when I started of 2004, and December, about a month later, I was visiting with this young lady, Laura. She's making cookies in the lounge, and another friend of ours. That friend had to leave, and then Laura asked me if I would stay and watch all of her baking stuff while she went to deliver some cookies, because it's college.
Run away and
yeah. Well, so nobody would come and mess with
someone's left a sack of flour here.
Exactly.
It's my lucky day.
Dump it out. So, but also too, like, I was very much in love with her, and if she wanted me to watch a pile of dirt all day, I would. I would have done anything. And so she asked me to do that. I said, absolutely. She left. And then after about 10 minutes, I realized, oh, shoot, I didn't bring anything to do. Who knows how long she's going to be gone. So I guess I'll pray my rosary till she gets back. Because that's all I had with me. And I started praying the rosary, and halfway through the third decade, so right in the middle of the rosary, I felt like seized by something. I couldn't stop praying the prayers, so my mouth was still praying, but my mind was like, what's going on? What's happening here? And I suddenly felt very small and very vulnerable. I felt like there was this like wind blowing everywhere, and I felt like I was moving really fast. And it was really scary. And I don't know how long that lasted, but eventually Laura came back, and as soon as she opened the door, it just stopped. And I was just like sitting there shivering and just confused. And she went right back to making cookies and making, mixing stuff. And I was sitting there left wondering, what the heck just happened to me? What was that? Mm-hmm. And I don't know, like, was this good? Was it evil? Like, and so I eventually came to the weird conclusion, like, maybe that was God, like, reaching out to me. Because I was thinking of stories that I remembered from church of, like, was it Elijah was in the cave and, like, God wasn't in the fire, the earthquake?
He was in the small.
He was in the small, quiet sound, but there was like all this craziness going on,
yeah.
Or like God coming down the mountaintop with Moses, and there's fire and smoke, and so thinking of all these Old Testament moments of God, it was like crazy. Because even though I felt small and vulnerable, I didn't feel like I was in danger. So my danger sense wasn't there, but it was still scary. And so I eventually like could talk, and I asked Laura, if I could ask her a question, and she turned and she noticed I was not okay. Mm-hmm. And so she came over and sat by me and said, "What's going on?" I said, "Well, I was praying. I had this experience, and I was wondering if you ever been like touched by God before." And she just nonchalantly said, "No, but my sister has." And I was, well, what was it like for her? And she said, "Oh, my sister said it was just so warm and safe and beautiful, and she just felt more love than she ever had before." I was like, well, that's not, in hindsight, looking back on it, realized too just how estranged I really was from God. Like, I didn't know him. And so I realized, like, I didn't know God. I had an idea about God, but like meeting him for the first time is scary. Just like, imagine if you could meet any famous person in the world, who would you want to meet? And then imagine meeting that person for the first time. You're probably going to feel really nervous and scared. Like, I actually don't know this person. Do they like me? What do they think about me? What am I going to say? What am I going to do? So that encounter with God in prayer was pretty scary. But my friend Laura was very encouraging. She prayed with me. The next day I talked to my priest, and he said, keep praying. Don't change anything. Keep praying as you've been praying. But tell God, like, you're listening. He's got your attention. And so I did that. And so another month goes by, praying whenever I can. So I continued to pray the rosary every spare moment, asking God for guidance and comfort, but also telling him, and I'm listening, I'm paying attention, like, tell me what I should do with my life. Mm-hmm. About a month goes by, and this band called Big Bad Voodoo Daddies coming to campus. They're a swing band. And I took a little swing dancing in high school, and I'd asked Laura if she'd want to go to this concert because the dance floor was going to be open. And she said yes, so I was freaking out, like, I get to dance with Laura. Oh my gosh, like, this could be it.
This could be the moment.
And I realized I had no nice clothes. I have no fashion sense, so religious life suits me very well. Because the church kind of tells you, like,
where it is.
You should just wear this in every circumstance, and so that helps. But I wanted something nice to wear, and so a mutual friend of ours and I went shopping. And while we were shopping, she asked me, like, "What's going on between you and Laura?" And I said, "Not as much as I wish there was." And I told her how I felt about Laura, and I really loved her and admired her and would love to be in a relationship with her. But I could never get Laura to share how she felt about me. And so she said, "Well, did you know about so-and-so?" And it's like, no. well, there's this young man in, I think it was Oklahoma or something, that she's trying to work things out with. And I was like, oh my gosh, of course. She isn't saying anything because she doesn't want to hurt me. So I felt like a moron that she's interested in someone else, and here I am imposing on her. So that night, the night before this concert and stuff, when I was ready for bed, I was going to pray my rosary until I fell asleep, I just talked to God a little bit and said, God, I really love Laura so much and I admire her, but it sounds like her heart's set on someone else. So I just want you to teach me how to love her the way you love her. Disinterested, unselfish, loving her for her sake. Help me to be for her who she needs me to be, instead of me trying to be for her who I want to be for her. And I just felt a lot of peace with that. Because I also was at a point where every time I was around her, it was just butterflies and anxiety of like, does she love me? Does she not? I don't know. And so I just felt all that go away. And I just realized she just needs me to be a friend right now. So I'm going to be the best friend she's ever had. And going to the concert was a lot of fun, and we danced. It was fun. And I didn't have that anxiety because I knew who I needed to be for her. But also too, it's like, be careful what you pray for, because I didn't realize what asking God for the grace to love her like he loves her, well, I didn't know where that would lead. And so the next night was Sunday night, and I was invited to sponsor somebody going through RCIA. So I went to the meeting, and there was a history professor giving a 1-hour lecture on the history of the Catholic Church. So 2,000 years in 1 hour is impressive.
Yeah.
But if you think about all the things he's going to have to skip over, there's going to be a lot of things he's not going to talk about. But for whatever reason, he felt like the Jesuits were important enough in church history to mention them briefly. And when he mentioned them, I don't even remember what he said about them. But when he mentioned them, I felt a brief return of that experience I'd had in prayer.
Wow.
A couple months prior. And I felt like that was God kind of poking me in the heart, like, look into this. And so there was a sister sitting at the table, and I said, do you know anything about the Jesuits? And she said, there's a pamphlet over there on the wall you can read. So I went over and got one and was reading. I was like, wow, never heard about these guys. Sound kind of interesting. I looked up stuff on the internet that night. Unfortunately, didn't come across any of the weird conspiracy theory stuff. But it was all very edifying stuff and true stuff. And so I found the email address of somebody called a vocations director and emailed him. And I still remember verbatim the email I sent. Dear Father Sazama, my name is Jake Boddicker. I'm a history major at the University of Northern Iowa. I just heard about the Jesuits. Here's my mailing address. Please send me anything free.
Anything
Sincerely,
free.
Jake Boddicker.
I am poor college student.
Yes.
Please help.
So I hit send. And then, again, as I'm getting ready to go to bed, praying my rosary, telling God, like, I heard about these Jesuits. I felt like you were trying to call my attention to this. Is this something you want me to look into? Is this a road you want me to walk down? And so I started to pray. And at the same point in the rosary, middle of the third decade, I had this experience again. But this time, like, it was just as intense, but there was no fear. And I felt very safe. I still felt small, but I felt protected and held, I guess. And just felt this, I don't know, felt in my heart like God was saying, yes, walk down this road and I'll tell you when and if to turn. And now I know that's what Ignatius calls consolation. Wow. But I just felt like, okay, finally, God's given me some direction. And so the next morning, I emailed the vocations director again and said, all right, here's what's going on. I just laid it all out in like a 3-page email. And to this day, he denies it. You don't know that
one word for word?
No,
you can't recite that?
I don't. I might have it on my computer somewhere, but I don't remember that email. But the next morning, it was Monday morning, like around 8, my phone rang. And I was like flopping around my bed trying to find my phone, and, throwing my retainer in the sink and trying to sound awake. Answered it, and it was a vocations director. To this day, he denies. Like, why would I call a college student at 8 a.m.?
8 a.m.
That can't be true.
I do that?
I was like, I remember it was 8 a.m.
It was traumatizing. Of course, I remember it was 8 a.m.
But it was an important call, and I told him what was going on, and he said, well, I'm going to send you this book, this book, this book. You read these books, and when you've read them, and if you're still interested, call me, and we'll talk more. But until then, just you keep talking to God.
It's great.
Yeah.
Vocations director. Yeah, he was really hands-on.
Well, I think he had enough experience of people having kind of this burst of initial fervor and then like burning out. And so as a way of testing, I think the legitimacy of the vocation is, I'm going to treat you like a grown-up. You read this, and if you're still interested, we'll continue this conversation. As opposed to like, yeah, let's get invested and excited and involved, and then like drop off the face of the earth.
Okay.
That's my charitable interpretation. But clearly it worked out, because here I am. So he sent me, I think, 3 books. I only read one of them, and that was enough. And it was called The Fifth Week by, I think, William O'Malley. And it just goes through, it's just a brief survey of the history of the Jesuits, our spirituality, formation, and then it profiles a number of Jesuit saints. And the 2 things that sold me were the story of St. Ignatius of Loyola and the stories of some of the other Jesuit saints, specifically Isaac Jogues and Miguel Pro. Because when I read the story of St. Ignatius, idealistic soldier, wounded in battle, deciding, I want to be a knight for Christ. I was like, oh, I know this man. He is me. Like, that's my story of, wanting to live this kind of life of honor and service and to have a purpose and to serve and to give my life to some greater thing. Mm-hmm. I always was kind of enamored with the idea of a king and a knight, and he had that too, but after his wounding and his convalescence, he had the grace to turn that desire into serving God as his king. And I was like, that is so awesome. I want to do that. But then when I read about like Isaac Jogues and how he was sent from France to the New World to be a missionary among Native Americans, he was captured, held as a slave, tortured, mistreated for a year, escaped back to Europe, convalesced, and then asked his superior, okay, send me back, I'm ready. And his superior be like, if you go back, they will finish what they started. You'll die.
Yeah.
And then I remember he said, but I love them and they don't know the gospel. And I was so struck by that. Like, that is insane courage and love. Could I be like that? And then Miguel Pro, he's a priest toward the end of the Cristeros War when Catholicism was illegal. And so he's going around in disguises or through Mexico City, ministering to people, having mass, hearing confessions, etc. Staying one step ahead of the federal police and eventually being captured and executed. And he had his arms spread wide, rosary in one hand, a crucifix in the other, and his last words were, long live Christ the King. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I couldn't believe that men of that level of heroism actually existed.
Yeah.
And also like wondering, is God calling me to join these men? Like, be one of them.
Like you had been like pre-gaming for this.
Yeah.
Ever since you were a kid and you realized what knights were and
mm-hmm.
you've been taking vows and everything.
And even joining the Knights of Columbus, there was a sense of fulfillment of that desire, but like I'd always kind of thought like, what I really wanted was still kind of a fairy tale, and it doesn't exist in the world. But then when I read the lives of these saints, I was like, it does. It's real. Like, my childhood desires of giving my life in that level of service, it's real. Mm-hmm. There are real people who have done it, and not just 500, 1,000 years ago. And so I was very excited about what I was reading, and I contacted the vocations director. It's like, I've only read one book, but let's go further with this. So also around the time of finishing that book and being super excited about it, I ran into Laura, and it'd been a while since we'd been able to hang out or do anything. And I asked her what she was doing that night, and she's like, actually, I'm free till 10 if you want to hang out. I said, let's come to my room, let's watch a movie. And so she came by about 7:30, 8 o'clock, and we went through my vast DVD collection. And for reasons unknown to me to this day, we settled on City of Angels.
As one does.
Which one does?
You're jonesing for some Nicolas Cage.
Oh,
Everyone needs a little bit of Nicolas Cage every once in a while.
Very theologically problematic. Didn't bother me at the time. And I was kind of excited because my memory of that movie was, it's a really beautiful love story. This angel falls in love with a human woman. And I forgot how tragic it is.
It's like ridiculously tragic.
Yeah.
For anyone who's never seen the movie, it's like Nicolas Cage sacrifices his angelhood by throwing himself off a building?
Yeah, by falling.
And he literally fell in love. And then he goes to this woman, and she's like nursing him back to health. And the next morning, she goes out to like buy tomatoes or something, and she's messing around on her bike like, la 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 la, and gets hit by a truck.
The end.
And it's like my mom, after my mom watched that movie, for like weeks, she went on and on. Dumbest movie I've ever seen in my life. I'm pretty sure she spent more time complaining about the movie than the time she spent watching it, wasting her time.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous movie.
It was not the movie we should have picked. Because by the end, Laura, who has a very tender heart, was bawling her eyes out. And I had one box of tissues in my room, and it was in a soggy pile next to her chair. And an immature man, when he encounters a crying woman, he thinks there is something broken that needs fixing. Mm-hmm. And so they freak out, and they're trying to like cheer him up and make him feel better and get him to stop crying. A mature man realizes a woman cannot cry forever. And so he just needs to patiently wait until she is done. And to not be afraid. So being an immature man, I was like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Here she was looking into a nice night, watch a movie, and I made her cry. So I got to cheer her up. And so I thought, I know, I'll tell her about this book I've been reading and these cool saints and stuff. Because she's very devout Christian. She loves Jesus. This will be really edifying. And so, I just kind of put an arm around her and started telling her these stories about these saints I've been reading about the Jesuits. And she started calming down and listening to the stories. And I don't remember everything I said, but I remember ending it with like, like when I pray about this, I think like maybe God wants me to be a priest. Maybe he wants me to be a Jesuit. And then she started crying again, even like harder. And I thought, like, man, this movie got to her bad.
Dang it, Nicolas Cage.
Yes, with your beautiful acting.
Beautiful Nicolas Cage acting.
And so, just kind of stay there with her until she wasn't crying anymore. And she eventually had to get going because she had to go on rounds. But by the time she left, she was smiling and everything was okay. Mm-hmm. But after she left, I brushed my teeth, got ready for bed, and before praying my rosary, I just started talking to God, like, thank you, God, for this wonderful evening and my wonderful friend and the relationship that we have and getting to spend time together. I'm so sorry that I upset her. And, if we do watch another movie, help us to pick a good one that'll uplift us and stuff. And
National Treasure or something.
Yeah, National Treasure,
Daredevil.
Raising Arizona, Sorcerer's Apprentice. There's all sorts of Nicolas Cage movies to pick from if we want to go that route. So I started praying my rosary, eventually fell asleep. Next morning, it was Sunday, so you go to Mass like you do. I was getting ready to go to Mass, and at the time I had very long hair, so showers took a little longer.
Gotta keep the mane beautiful.
Yeah, condition all those knots and stuff out.
Yeah.
So as I was shampooing and conditioning my luxurious locks, I was thinking about the evening before, and I kept getting snagged on the whole movie's over, crying, cheer her up, crying again. And I was trying to figure out like what was going on there, and I realized it was after I mentioned the possibility of being a priest and a Jesuit that she started crying again. And then it hit me like, oh my gosh, she likes me. Why else would that happen? I know, right? Bright, perceptive. So finished my shower, dried off, got dressed, ran down to her dorm room, knocked on the door. She answered, and I asked if I could come in. She let me in. She crawled up into her loft bed and peeked out under the covers. I'm standing on the ladder talking to her. I was like, I think I know where you were crying last night. And she tried to play it off. It's stupid. Forget about it. It's no big deal. And I told her, like, I still love you, and I would love to be with you if that's what you want. But I need to know how you feel about me, because I don't know. And I don't want to sacrifice a friendship if I'm mistaken in how I feel about you and how you might feel about me. And she tried to explain things, and like she was still kind of healing from a breakup from a year or so ago from a long-term boyfriend. And really just trying to like deflect the whole issue. And I told her, well, I haven't committed to anything. I love you and would love to be with you, so I'm going to be praying and asking God what he wants me to do, to go be a priest or to marry you. Mm-hmm. Or to be with you, I guess. I probably didn't say marry out loud, even though that's what was in my heart.
I know why you're crying. You're in love with me.
Yes.
You want to marry me.
So I told her I wasn't going to give up on her. And I didn't. I started writing poems like every day. If I was in class and I had an idea for a poem, I'd write it. And then when I'd go back to my dorm, I'd slip it under her door so she'd find it when she got back from class.
Aww.
If it was in the evening,
all the girls watching this right now.
It was an all-girls dorm floor.
Guys are sitting there like taking notes. Like, oh, that's what I gotta do. That's what I gotta do.
But yeah, if it was in the evening, I'd go and knock on her door and hand it to her. Or if it was like the middle of the night, I'd wake up with an idea, I'd write it and slip it under her door so she'd find it in the morning. Sometimes I would ask whoever was working the desk to put it in her mailbox. So she was finding poems all over the place. And I think in the span of just a few months...
She was cool with it though, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's not like she was cool with it. Don't do that if the female receiving it is not cool with it.
She was cool with it.
That's when you become a stalker.
And she said I've kept every poem and every note. And so I think sometime in mid-March, I thought, okay, March is going to end, then it's going to be April, and then it's going to be finals week. And we need to have at least one more big conversation before the school year ends. And being an RA and a double major, she's going to be busy the longer I wait. So I asked her if she would have time in the next couple weeks to get together to talk about us. Mm-hmm. And she said she'd let me know what she had time for. I went back to my room and decided I need a backup plan in case she's too busy. And so I started writing a letter explaining how I felt, where I was in my discernment, what I felt God was inviting me to and saying. And I went to all of my women friends and said, read this, imagine you're her, or imagine somebody you really care about wrote this to you. Yeah. And give me some feedback. What isn't clear? What's missing that I should say? What should be taken out or changed? What really helps? What do you like? And so I drafted it close to 12 times and just refined it every time I got some feedback. And finally had it, I think, perfected. And I decided if I hadn't heard from Laura about getting together by the 1st of April, I would give her the letter and say, you've got a month before finals to read this. please read it and tell me when you've read it. I didn't expect a response. I just wanted to know that she read it and she knew what was on my heart. And so I ended up giving it to her because she didn't get back to me about getting together to talk. And the month goes by and I'm losing my mind. Like, did she read it? Did she read it? And never heard back from her. And so here it's the end of finals week and I'm moving out of my dorm. And once you're moved, all your stuff's moved out, you got to get an RA to sign off, like your room isn't destroyed and all that. And she was the only one available. So she came up to my room and was checking things off her list. And we were chit-chatting, and I asked her if she'd had time to read the letter yet. And she said she hadn't. So I was disappointed, but also understanding because I knew she was incredibly busy. And I said, well, you've got the whole summer. Just shoot me an email to let me know when you've read it.
Yeah.
And so we bid farewell and went on with the summer. Didn't hear anything from her. That summer I spent 6 weeks with the Jesuits in Milwaukee because I didn't really know the Jesuits personally. So they thought it'd be a good experience to live with Jesuits, to work alongside them.
Free labor, free college kid labor.
There's that too. There were, I think, 4 or 5 of us in the program. And so in the mornings, I was a tutor at the Jesuit high school. In the afternoons, we helped out with this program at a Hispanic parish. And I came away from that summer with a strong sense that if this is what God is calling me to, I think I could be happy. It really demystified a lot of things. And I met a lot of good Jesuits, had a lot of good conversations. Also, toward the end, we had a 3-day silent retreat. And there was one experience of prayer where I can't remember what I was praying about or how I was praying, but I had this image of Christ's head with the crown of thorns on it, and I had this deep sense that God was calling me to a huge sacrifice of some kind. But there wasn't any more clarity than that. And so that kind of shook me a little bit. But since there wasn't any specific thing that I felt God was asking of me, it was just kind of like a warning or an invitation of some sort. I didn't really think much of it. But I did ask for an application so that if in the months to come I felt God was saying, yeah, do this, I could get to it right away. So the summer ends, get back to school, and I ran into Laura on campus, and we chit-chat a little bit and decided we should get together to talk and to catch up. And so we agreed to get together, I think that Thursday, which happened to be the 1st of September, 2005, a day that I'll never forget. She came to my dorm, and we talked about our summers, and kind of hit the highlights, showed some pictures from things we'd done that summer. And I asked her if she'd read the letter because it had been 5 months to the day. And she said she hadn't. She said she started it, but hadn't read the whole thing. Which I was very disappointed to hear. But I told her, well, don't worry about the letter. You can keep it if you want or throw it away. Up to you. But I told her just everything that I'd written in the letter, how I felt about her, where I was kind of in my discernment. But I didn't want her to assume I was going to go do the Jesuit thing because I had not made a decision. I hadn't committed to anything, hadn't signed anything, because I still really wanted to be with her. My chiefest desire was to be a father and a husband. But I also wanted to do whatever it was God wanted me to do. And God hadn't told me to marry her. He hadn't told me to be a priest. So I was still having to decide. But I was very careful to be very conditional with my language because I didn't want her to assume, I'm going to go be a priest now. Sorry, this didn't work out between us. Because I hadn't signed any commitment. I hadn't made a decision. I was waiting for God to tell me, go marry her. Go be a priest.
Yeah.
I wanted that clarity, but I hadn't got it yet. I was still waiting to make a decision. And so as I was sharing everything, I didn't want her to think, okay, this is all over. So I don't remember everything I said, but I do remember ending with something like, maybe God does want me to be a Jesuit. Maybe he does want me to be a priest. I don't know yet. Well, then she started to cry hard. And in between, sobs, she's finally started just letting it all out. And basically said that she had loved me this whole time, the same as I had loved her. But as she prayed about it and spoke to God about us, she could tell that he was doing something very important in me, and she didn't want to interfere with that. She didn't want to be a distraction or an obstacle. And so she kept all of it to herself. So while I am helping her with different stuff, hanging out with her, encouraging her, being a friend, writing all this poetry, telling her how I love her and how beautiful I think she's, pouring all of this goodness and love and affection out, she's just like bottling it all up, wishing she could reciprocate, but feeling like God was asking her to leave me all to him. And that's when I realized not only did she love me, but she loved me in a way no one had ever loved me before. And it was that, total care and good for the other person, putting themselves aside. It's that love Jesus talked about, right? Mm-hmm. Laying down your life for your friend. And granted, she didn't do that in a physical way, but interiorly, she's like, I don't matter right now. It needs to be him and God, and whatever I can do to stay out of that and to push him in that direction, that's what he needs. And so that was pretty earth-shaking for me. Mm-hmm. But also, as I felt like I finally know how she feels. I finally know, like I can finally solve for X.
Yeah.
And make a decision. Because if she'd just said, well, I really appreciate you, but, I just want to be friends. It's like, great, I'm going to go do the Jesuit thing. I'm going to miss you. But now I know that's what I'm giving up, what I'm not. But if she said, I really love you and I'd like to be with you, then it's like, oh my gosh, well, if I join the Jesuits, I'm giving up this. And if I go be with her, then I'm giving up this whole Jesuit thing. But at least I would know. So she wept. And I just let her weep for a while. And at some point, I don't even know why, but I felt moved to ask her if I could wash her feet. And she allowed me to. And I feel, in hindsight, I felt like that was the Holy Spirit saying, here's what your relationship's going to be. Mm-hmm. And I think that was his way of kind of starting to close that door. However, I was so excited that she loved me so much that I was kind of not listening anywhere beyond like that inspiration to ask if I could do this. So I washed her feet and we prayed for a little bit, and then she had to get going. And I spent the rest of the evening just reflecting on our conversation and stuff, and just so grateful to God that I finally knew how she felt, and I felt like I could finally start to move forward. But the next day I felt like something was off and something wasn't right. I thought there'd be some peace, but there wasn't. And so I talked to a mutual friend of ours and shared our conversation and stuff, and she said, you really messed up. Like, if I know Laura, I lived with her for a year, and she probably thinks that you are going to go do this Jesuit thing and you're going to go off and be a priest. And if that's not true, if you want to be with her, you need to tell her soon, because once she makes up her mind, you will not be able to change it. And so I started to panic, like, because I thought I'm going to lose her. She thinks I'm going to be a priest. I haven't made that decision yet. What am I going to do? And so I made a list, a to-do list. I was like, I need to talk to her soon. I need to pray. And I really need to trust God. And I need to show Laura how much I love her, because apparently every attempt to tell her has failed. And in that moment, I also realized that my idea of trusting God was not real trust. My idea of trust was, whatever God asks me to do, I will do it because God asked me to, and I can trust him. Real trust is, I am going to do this because I trust you, God. I'm a little uncertain, but I think everything's going to be okay. Very much like in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the leap from the lion's head. He cannot see how this is going to work, but he takes that leap. So my prayer was basically, God, tell me what you want me to do. I trust you. I'll do it. And then God saying, Jacob, I want you to trust me. And then I would say, yes, God, I trust you. Tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it. I want you to trust me. Back and forth, and forth.
I want you to trust me.
Right.
Yeah, I'll trust you. No, pay attention.
And so in that moment of realizing I could lose Laura, I realized I wasn't trusting God. What God was really saying is, look, Jacob, I just want you. I want your soul. I want your heart. I want you for eternity. I have laid before you 2 ways you can give yourself to me. Pick one and let me bless it. But pick one. It doesn't matter to me which one you pick, because either way, if you pick one because you love me and want to give yourself to me in this way, I get what I want. So pick one, go with it, and let me bless it. And so I called a friend of mine who is now a Dominican sister and asked her to take me to Walmart because I need to get some things. She's like, I took you to Walmart on Sunday and you got a bunch of stuff. Like, did you already eat everything? And I was like, it's not, it's different. Just, can you take me? So she took me and she's pushing the cart and I'm throwing in like a thing of rope, an outdoor blanket, jerky, bottles of water. And she's like, are you going on a camping trip? And I said, I'll tell you when we're done. So get done shopping. She's driving me back to the dorm and asked her what she's doing at 6 a.m. the next morning. She said, I'm sleeping. What are you doing? I said, well, I was wondering if you could drop me off on the edge of town because I'm going to walk to Laura's house and tell her that I love her and I want to be with her.
And how long a trip is that?
Well, so she was going home to her family for Labor Day weekend, and it was about 40 miles from campus. And I didn't know how to walk there. I knew how to drive there. So my plan, I was just going to walk on the shoulder of the interstate. And
very safe.
Yeah, and legal. Not. So that was my grand plan because I knew I could probably get there in a day or two. So I'd get to talk to Laura sooner rather than later. I'd have lots of time to pray because I'm just walking. I would be radically trusting God. It's like, I have no idea what's going to happen on this journey, but I trust that you're going to take care of me. And also, I would think, show Laura, I want to be with you. And I love you. And so look what I did for you. This feat, I guess. So my friend agreed to drop me off. And I made it about 20 miles or so when I was just about out of water. And the blisters on my feet were pretty devastating. I won't go into too much detail, but eventually I think 3 or 4 toenails would fall off because the blisters were that bad. They grew back, thankfully, but that was an interesting experience in itself. Once I started getting low on water, I realized I was kind of getting into some danger. Yeah. Because it was very hot out. I didn't look ahead to what the temperatures were going to be. And I'd already gone through 2.5 bottles of water. I was down to half a bottle. And I thought, okay, I need to start looking for water. So I'd go to whatever houses were nearest the interstate, and nobody was home or nobody would open their door. And just when I was thinking of calling my friend to come and pick me up and to give up on this journey, a car pulled over with a couple of college guys in it, and they asked if they could give me a ride. And so I said, yeah, take me to this town up here so I can get more water, and then I'll be on my way. And so they let me get in, and we started talking, and we realized we go to the same school. And they asked me what I was doing walking on the side of the road. And I told them, I'm walking to this girl's house to tell her I love her and I want to be with her. And they thought that was so cool. And they had all these kind of questions and things. And eventually we got to this gas station, but then they locked their doors and wouldn't let me out. And we had a big argument. I said, I have to walk. I have to finish this. But the driver, in a statement of maturity that surprised me, considering he was wearing a striped shirt and a beanie, like a little propeller on top, he said, I don't want to get home tonight and turn on the TV and see a picture of you and saying, like, you know, this man was found dead in a ditch, because I'll feel like it was my fault. So tell me where she lives and we'll drop you off. And so I said, well, the dangerous part is the interstate. So if you drop me off at exit such and such, it's like 7 or 8 more miles of country highway. It's a lot safer. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we agreed to. So they did that. They dropped me off. And as they drove away, I realized I never was able to get out of the car to get water. So I started walking down this highway, house to house. Nobody would open their doors or nobody was home.
No.
And I'm like biting into apples and licking the apple just to like moisten my tongue. And it's getting pretty bad. I was very tired, and I don't know if I was dehydrated, but I definitely felt very thirsty. And so I saw one more house on the road, and I thought, if that person doesn't give me water, I quit. I'm just going to call my friend. But this nice old man opened the door and refilled my water bottles. So I was able to limp on, and eventually got to her house and dropped all my stuff in her yard. And I had a rose and a cardboard tube to give her. And so I took the rose out and rang her doorbell, and she answered it, and I just like fell at her feet. I had nothing left. And she and her sister picked me up and put me in a chair, and her sister ran out to get some water. And Laura put my feet up in a chair and took my shoes off. I was like, what are you doing here? And I did not think for a moment. I was so fixed on seeing her. I didn't even consider, like, oh yeah, her family's going to be there too. What am I going to tell them when I suddenly show up? So
ask for her hand in marriage.
Yeah, right. Negotiate the dowry.
I have walked here to show you my conviction and ask for your daughter's hand.
Yeah, I'd never even met her parents. Yeah, she asked what I was doing. I said, I came here to tell you that I love you. I don't want to be with you. I don't want to lose you. And she said, talk about this later. So her sister comes back. Like, what are you doing here? What a surprise. Like, oh, I wanted to surprise your sister and come and visit for Labor Day weekend. And she's like, we should have just asked for a ride. Like, yeah, I didn't think about it until after she left. And so I realized, like, I'm going to have to just lie to her family this whole weekend. And so I had to go, take a shower and stuff because they were getting ready to go to her mom's birthday party at someone else's house and like, crash that party. And we eventually got to talk, and I told her why I'd come and how I'd come to the conclusion of walking there. And she said, she cried a lot and talked to her friends and her mom and just decided she needed to focus on finishing school first and to let relationships and all that stuff wait until after that. And also too, that it seemed clear to her that I needed to sort out this whole priesthood thing before I was ready for any kind of relationship. And so I realized I was too late, and it was painful to admit. I said, well, if you'll just let me kind of rest for a little bit, I'll be on my way. And she said,
walk back.
Well, my plan was not to walk back, but to walk far enough that I couldn't see her house anymore, and then lay in a ditch and call my friend and say, I'm in a ditch on such and such road. Come and find me. And then I was just going to lay there and cry and maybe sleep and maybe die. I didn't care at that point.
One of them.
So, but she said, you're in no shape to walk back. You'll just have to stay here. And then Monday I'll take you back to school. And so I thought, oh great, I've got the weekend to win her back. And at first it seemed like I was succeeding. Her family was happy to see me. They were gracious hosts. Had some wonderful time with Laura and her sister. But as the weekend went on, she got much more distant and much more cold. By the time she was driving me back to school and we were talking about the next step, she told me what an important friend I had been and an important support, especially when a lot of her friends had abandoned her. and school and work was really overwhelming. And also she'd gone through some health stuff.
Yeah.
And I was there.
Yeah.
And I was very important to her, and she didn't want to lose that. And so she wanted to continue to be friends and spend time with each other. But as far as being in a relationship beyond that, she just wanted to wait till school was finished. So I respected that. So she dropped me off, and as the weeks went on, whenever my friends and I were going to do something, I'd invite her, like, hey, we're going to go see a movie. Do you want to come with? We're going to go to this prayer thing. You want to come with? We're going to go out to eat. You want to come with? Never got a response. And so by about a month after this whole thing, I emailed her and said, I can't do this anymore. I got to let you go.
Yeah.
And didn't really hear a response then either. So the next few months were very sad. I felt very broken, rejected. I felt like I'd screwed up everything. I was tempted to apply to the order, but more as a last act of desperation. Like, well, I have nothing left. Why not? But I realized that's a bad reason to enter religious life or priesthood, or anything for that matter. And I realized I need to wait till I have a higher degree of interior freedom before I apply. And that came when it was December, so this was 3 months-ish later. And I was invited by the director of the choir at the church I was going to consider applying for the university choirs. Because he thought singing a higher level of music, being in a bigger group, that I'd really enjoy that. And so I went to the music building to find out how to apply for auditions. And one of the choir directors encountered me in the hallway and addressed me by name, which really surprised me because I'd only met her once before after a concert that my friend was in. And my friend introduced me. Mm-hmm. And, but she still remembered me a year later. And it turned out she just has a gift for that. But at the time, I felt like, wow, someone sees me. And this person's like happy I'm here. And it really kind of pulled me out of myself and really shone a light of charity into a dark place. So I tried out, I auditioned, and my audition went surprisingly well for me because not only was she there, but also the other choir director, and they both asked me if I would be willing to be in both their top ensembles. They were very impressed with
I'm going to make you sing
what
something
I offered.
After this.
Okay, we'll see if I can think of something to sing.
A stirring rendition of Row, Row, Row Your Boat.
As long as you sing the round.
I wasn't asked to be in a choir. No one's ever asked me to be in a choir.
I've heard you sing to your baby. I know you can sing. So they asked me if I could fit 2 choirs into my schedule, and I gladly dropped a class I didn't want to take anyway. But it was this one choir director, her name was Dr. Lamartine, who I just adored. She was so kind. Everybody loved her. They also had me taking voice lessons, and I started uncovering a gift that I didn't know I had, which has served me well as a priest. Priests who can sing make a difference. And a few weeks into choir, I was sitting outside the choir room, waiting for the doors to be open, praying my rosary, like I did. And Dr. Lamartine came up, started unlocking the door, and said, Jacob, I had a dream about you last night. And it's important to note at this time, as I mentioned before, I had long hair, a much shorter beard. But everybody's like, oh, dude, you look like Jesus. Cool. And I was very annoyed by that because it's one thing to look like him. It's one thing to be like him. So here, my choir teacher, lovely young woman, at least, I don't know, she's probably in her late 30s, early 40s. I never ask a woman how old she is. Dad taught me that. Has served me well. But also somebody I really respected and admired and adored. She said, I had a dream about you. So that kind of made me nervous. And then she said, in my dream, I kept calling you Jesus instead of Jacob. And it seemed like the most ordinary thing in the world to do. It felt very natural to say that. And I just wanted to share that with you.
Wow.
And I was really stunned because, she was Catholic, but I'd only seen her at Mass one time. in the whole, I guess by that point I'd been there for 2 years. So she didn't strike me as a very religious person. But also, I felt like if in her dream she called me Jesus instead of Jacob, and that seemed ordinary to her, perhaps she saw something in me that I had lost sight of. And so I took that as God's way of saying, she sees you're ready for this. Mm-hmm. So apply. So I got my application, filled out everything I could, scheduled my physical exam, scheduled interviews in Milwaukee, and went through the whole application process, prompted by this dream that my choir director had had. And
so the moral of that story is, if you dream about someone, you should tell them.
Well, depending on your dream. But it did turn out to be very important in this case.
So if you really, really want to encourage a young man to become a priest, you just tell them that you had a dream about them in persona Christi.
Like you do.
As one does.
So it was 4 months afterwards that I got the phone call that I'd been accepted. And by that point, I had a lot more peace and a lot more confidence about the whole thing. And I was very excited. I started giving away my stuff. I started sharing the news with my friends. They had a little going away party for me. I emailed Laura immediately and said, I want you to be the first to know that I've been accepted. Didn't hear any response. But I spent the next months preparing to enter. Again, giving away a lot of stuff, seeing friends, for what I thought might be the last time. I had no idea. I had this idea that I was entering this religious order. Yes, and I would never see anybody again.
One glass of wine a year on my birthday.
It seemed like that, because I just didn't know. Mm-hmm. But then when I got there, it's like, oh, yeah, this is a lot more chill than I thought it would be. There were times where we weren't allowed to contact people or receive letters or phone calls. We did have to live very simply.
I don't know, you talking about like the month of forced homelessness does not sound too chill to me.
Well, but after you've done like 30 days of silent contemplation, it's like, okay, what's 30 days with no money? Meh.
I know that all too well.
Yeah, maybe
30 days with no money.
Maybe. So finding out that I've been accepted was very joyful, and I was excited. I entered in August of 2006. And, your first year novitiate, you take time getting used to living in community, getting a rhythm of prayer, daily mass. You do the full spiritual exercises, 30 days of silent contemplation, discerning if Jesus is calling you to give your life to him in the society or not. And came out of that feeling very confirmed, but also had this moment where God and I kind of argued a bit, because that desire to be a father and husband was still very strong. And St. Ignatius talks about how God gives us our deepest, holiest desires so that we will come to him for fulfillment. So our deepest desires are meant to lead us to him. And so I had this moment where I'm like, God, what gives? I've wanted to be a father and husband my whole life. You gave that to me. Mm-hmm. And then when I asked you what you wanted me to do, you wanted me to be a priest and give that up. I don't get that. That seems pretty contrary and not fair. I wanted to be with Laura. You wanted me to be a priest. So I'm doing what you want me to do. This doesn't make sense to me. So please make it make sense. Ball's in your court. Bring it up if we need to talk about it again. And the issue didn't come up again the rest of that year. And I just kind of moved on from it. And it's like, okay, God wants me to be a Jesuit, I'm going to be a Jesuit. And so after the exercises, we did 5 weeks of living with and caring for the elderly or the infirm or the handicapped. You do 30 days, what's called pilgrimage, where you pick where in the continental U.S. you want to start. You get a one-way bus ticket there, $35, a phone card, and some extra clothes in your breviary. And you are not allowed to return for 30 days. If you come back on day 29, hey, I got here a day early, sorry, you will sleep outside the novitiate door, and they'll let you in the morning. I think the purpose of the pilgrimage experiment is to get an experience of real poverty, but also an experience of God's real providential care. So that no matter where you are as a Jesuit, what situation you're in, you're like, you know what? When I had nothing for 30 days, God took care of me.
Yeah.
And so I took my one-way bus ticket to Waterloo, Iowa, and then walked from Waterloo to Cedar Falls and spent 2 weeks on the campus of the college I'd gone to. Because I wanted to do two things. One, I wanted to revisit where my vocation was born with this new perspective of having done the exercises, and I've been a novice for a while. And just to kind of more deeply understand, like, what was God doing with me here? The second thing is I was still very heartbroken over the whole Laura thing. And I knew there was a nature trail following an old railroad bed that went near her house and went all the way through near campus. And I thought I would have somebody drop me off at that trail, and I would walk the trail back to campus and kind of finish the walk that I started and take that time to pray and ask for healing, and et cetera, et cetera. And so spent 2 weeks in the UNI area, started that walk, and my plan was when it starts to get late in the day, I would start knocking on doors asking people if they had a place I could stay for the night, whether it was in the house or in a garage or a barn, whatever. I just needed some shelter because it was April, and Iowa at that time of year still got pretty cold at night, and I didn't have camping gear. So yeah, I did that. I had somebody drop me off near Laura's house. I was so scared to walk by that house because I thought, what if someone sees me? What if she's home? But nothing happened. And the further I got from her house, the more peace and kind of healing I felt. Wow. And so I got on the trail and was walking. Sun's getting low in the sky. Start walking toward this house, and this kid gets out of a car and says, "Who are you?" And I said, "Hey, my name's Jacob. I'm studying to be a priest, and I'm backpacking this trail and just looking for a place I can stay for the night." He's like, "We go sleep in the barn." Oh, great. So I'm in the barn making my little bed out of hay, and there's like deer heads hanging from the ceiling for some reason. And then I hear this guy yelling, "Who the is in my barn?" So I run out, and this guy's yelling at me, and I tell him who I am and what I'm doing. And I said, "Your son." I did think that he had a gun. I don't think he did, but I felt like I was going to get shot. I'm going to die. And so he explained, like, I can't stay because they're renting the place, and if I did something, they could get kicked out. So I had to move on. And I tried a few places after that, but nobody would let me go. I tried sleeping outside.
Because that's the start of like every single murder documentary.
Maybe.
That is. It's true.
Maybe.
And the people who watch my stuff, they've seen those documentaries. They've seen them.
But I feel like I would be the murderer rather than the victim. So yeah, maybe they thought I was a murderer.
Yeah, they thought you were a murderer.
This face. So I tried sleeping outside. It was too cold. Could not stop shivering. Could not get warm. And realized, like, I have to stay warm or I could die. So I was like, the only way to keep warm is to keep walking. So I walked probably 20 miles or so through the night. Got to the next town. And eventually found a hotel. It was more of a motel. Very low-key thing. But the lobby door was open, so I was able to curl up on the floor, and it was warm. And I slept for a bit. And then in the morning, realized, I feel pretty much at peace with this whole Laura thing right now. I feel like the goal of this part of my pilgrimage has been accomplished. Who am I trying to impress by forcing myself to finish this? Like, this was just the first night. And I almost died. So that's first year novitiate. Second year, the main thing is you spend 5 months living and working with Jesuits. I was on the Wind River Indian Reservation for 5 months. And the summer after that, I was approved for vows. I was excited to take vows. Everybody else was excited. But as I approached my 8-day retreat that summer, I realized I hadn't really stopped to ask God if he wanted me to take vows. So I thought that would be a good thing to seek confirmation for on my retreat. And at some point in my retreat, my director asked me to contemplate the story of Mary and Joseph traveling to Bethlehem for the census. And there was a point where I was imagining Mary on the back of a donkey. They're approaching Bethlehem, and she starts having contractions, and her water breaks. And she's like, Joseph, the baby's coming. We need to have a place to have this baby. And so he's going door to door asking if there's room. Is there room? Is there room? Everybody's like, no, get out of here. No room at the inn. Somebody says, there's a stable down there. We keep animals. Go down there and have your baby. And so I really thought a lot about what must have been going on in Mary's heart. Because here she is. She wants to do God's will. What is God's will? Bring the Son of God, the Messiah, into the world. She's also a devout Jew. What does every Jew at that time want? Wants the Messiah. Come, bring us our Messiah, save us. And here she is, forcing the Messiah to wait because there's no room for him. And just imagining the anguish in her heart, like, I just want to bring the Messiah into the world, but I can't right now. And so I realized, like, wow, the church is kind of like that, just bursting with Jesus and a desire to bring Jesus into the world. The world's like, there's no room. And so the only place where Jesus can come into the world is humble, empty hearts that need to be filled and recognize their need to be filled. Kind of like the cave, the manger, whatever. And so I was like, okay, Mary and the church, there's this parallel. I thought I was being profoundly original at the time. It turns out that's a thing. And so it's like,
nothing new under the sun.
No, I've never discovered a new Catholic thing. Just rediscovered. So Mary and the church. Mary truly belongs to God, the Father of her child. The church belongs to Christ, the Son of God. And then I was like, what about Joseph? Is there a parallel with him? And so I thought about Joseph. Joseph was a righteous man. He wanted a wife. He wanted kids. He wanted a family. And I realized God was saying to Joseph, you're a righteous man. You're holy. I love you. I trust you. You want a wife? I entrust you with my wife, Mary. I want you to love her, protect her, serve her, provide for her as if she was yours. But remember, she's not yours. She's mine. And how you love and serve her is how you love and serve me. And you want a family. I want to entrust you with our son, to love him, serve him, teach him, raise him, protect him, provide for him, as if he was your own boy. But remember, he's not yours, he's mine. And how you love and serve my son is how you love and serve me. And that's when I realized this whole time, from when I was in 6th grade and wanted to be a dad, to that retreat, God was saying to me, Jacob, I love you and I trust you. You want a wife? I want to offer you the bride of Christ, to be your wife, to give your life to the church, to love the church, serve, protect her, honor her as if she was yours. But remember, she's not yours, she's mine. And how you love and serve the church is how you love and serve my son. And you want to be a father? Everyone will call you father. All the children of the church. And I want you to love them and serve them, provide for them, protect them, nourish them as if they were your own children. But remember, they're not yours, they're mine. How you love and serve the people of the church is how you love and serve my son. And I also felt like God was putting this call in my heart to, if you're going to be a priest, I want you to serve and love everyone as if they were your own children. So that when they call you father, it's not just a title, it's a reality, it's true. And so that has really shaped how I try to be a priest. I try to be a father to people. But that's also when I realized what God had been doing, again, was, I know your heart. I created it. I gave you your desire to be a father and a husband. But he needed to teach me that below that desire was just a simple, deep desire to give myself spousally and in a fatherly way. Whether that was marriage or priesthood, both vocations could fulfill that desire, but God knew that being a priest would fulfill it on a much deeper and fuller level than marriage ever could. Could I have gotten married to Laura and had a bunch of kids? Yeah, and he would have blessed it. I would have been happy. I think there would have been times in my married life where I would have felt like, is there more? Because I feel like I had a heart big enough that we could have had 12, 15 kids, and I've been like, I could we have one more? And I would have always been wondering, like, could I love more? But as a priest, like, I'm constantly finding new children to love. And God knew that my heart would be fulfilled in a way through priesthood that it couldn't be fulfilled in marriage. And I realized that the sacrifice I was making wasn't so much, I want you to give up your desire to be a father and husband in order to be a priest. I had to give up my narrow understanding of how my desire could be fulfilled. I thought if you want to be a father and husband, you got to get married. Mm-hmm. And if you want to be a priest, can't get married, can't be a father, can't be a husband. And God showed me, no, both can fulfill that. And this one, if you trust me, will fulfill it a lot more. And I realized I wanted to be a priest my whole life and didn't know it. And so that was the confirmation I needed. I took vows, did 3 years of philosophy studies in St. Louis, 3 years of apostolic work in Milwaukee, 3 years of theology in Berkeley, and was ordained in 2017 and sent to the Rosebud Indian Reservation in South Dakota. And I was a pastor of 2 parishes for 4 years. And here I am today, still a priest, with more people on Father's Day wishing me happy Father's Day and sharing with me the kind of father I've been for them than I ever would have experienced had I had my own children.
Yeah, I think for Father's Day, I had my kids make a Happy Father's Day video for you on your wall.
Yeah. And, people send cards. I've had at least one young man write a letter to me asking me my permission for him to marry one of my spiritual daughters. Never thought I'd do that as a priest.
That's hardcore.
I've had moments, I've had spiritual daughters who have said, you're the first one to teach me that I'm beautiful and good. And my own father never taught me that. Yeah. It's just like, I never thought.
So you'd be in the position to fulfill fatherly needs to people who had earthly biological fathers.
Mm-hmm. And so there's been many instances where Jesus, I need you to be a father, for reals right now, for this person. And so, just always being attentive to that and finding so much joy in it. And I find everything I sacrificed, except sex, of course, in the beginning to be a priest, all the fatherly stuff, I thought I'd never do. God has always given back to me in ways I never imagined.
Yeah.
But always as a priest. And so people ask me, have you ever regretted your decision or wondered what it'd be like to be married? It's I haven't. Because I haven't had a reason to. Because everything, again, I thought I was giving up, God has given back to me. Mm-hmm. But in a priestly context. And so I have everything I've wanted.
Yeah.
And so that is the extended version, special edition director's cut of my vocation story.
Thank you for telling us that.
My pleasure.
And now I'm going to post bloopers.
Awesome.
Stay tuned for bloopers. We match. We're both wearing black. How happenstance is that?
Memento mori.
That would have been so bad if we had continued making this with the AC on. I would have been editing what is that sound? Oh no. Hello.
Straighten this out.
You gotta put your hands down.
Wrinkly.
I'll wrinkle it.
Jazz hands. Their worship, traditionally, they have different dances that they do to different songs. And the dances are full of symbolic meaning.
Ken Burns told me that the reason they danced and shook was because they were all celibate.
Maybe, but they didn't tell me any of that when I was there, so who knows? They don't dance anymore, but they still sing some of those songs. There were baby shakers